I had always considered our marriage to be one of the few constants in my life. My wife, Sarah, was my rock, beautiful, witty, and full of life. We had shared 10 years of love, struggles, and dreams. But looking back, I can pinpoint the moment the doubt began to creep in. It wasn't anything overt, just a whisper in the back of my mind, a subtle shift in her demeanor that I couldn't ignore. Sarah had been working long hours at her new job in event management. It was demanding, she explained, requiring late nights, weekend shifts, and occasional out-of-town trips. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She had always been ambitious, and her career was thriving. But slowly, I started noticing changes. She would come home late, her laughter a little too bright, her eyes slightly too distant. Her phone, once an open book, became a guarded secret, always face down on the counter. And the intimacy we had shared so effortlessly began to feel forced. But every time I brought it up, she brushed it off with excuses about stress and exhaustion. One day, while Sarah was away on a work trip, I was reorganizing our closet. That's when I saw it. A small, locked wooden box, tucked behind her neatly folded scarves. My curiosity got the better of me. It wasn't like her to keep secrets. I found the key in her jewelry drawer and opened it. Inside, I found photos. They weren't just photos of Sarah. They were photos of her with another man. The two of them laughing, holding hands, and even kissing in places I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I went through the stack, each image unraveling the life I thought we had built together. My heart raced, my mind spinning with questions. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Why? But the most chilling part was a note at the bottom of the box. My heart is torn, but I can't deny how he makes me feel alive in ways I've never known. My world shattered in that moment. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with was a stranger. I sat on the floor, clutching the photos, unable to breathe. What do you do when the foundation of your life crumbles beneath you? I didn't confront her that night. I needed answers, a plan, and above all, clarity. Little did I know, this discovery was only the beginning. The days that followed felt like a fog, each moment thick with doubt and rage. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat without feeling the bitter taste of betrayal. I replayed every conversation Sarah and I had ever had, searching for clues I might have missed. Had there been signs all along? She returned from her trip a few days later, breezing into the house with a casual, "Hey, babe," and a peck on my cheek. Her scent, once comforting, now made my stomach churn. I stood frozen in the kitchen, gripping the counter as she rattled on about how exhausting the conference had been. Her words felt hollow, like a script she had rehearsed. I tried to keep it together, playing the part of the oblivious husband. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I needed more than photos and a cryptic note. I needed the whole truth, no matter how ugly it was. That night, after she fell asleep, I unlocked her phone. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages. It wasn't easy. Sarah was meticulous. Most of the threads were mundane, filled with work-related chatter or exchanges with friends. But then I found a hidden folder in her gallery. Videos. It felt like my chest caved in as I hit play. The first clip was innocent enough, her smiling at the camera, talking about a work event. But the second video was different. She was with him, the same man from the photos. They were in a hotel room, laughing and toasting with glasses of champagne. And then the third video, I couldn't bring myself to watch it all. It was enough to know what they had shared, what she had stolen from me. I turned the phone off and sat in the darkness, the weight of my discovery pressing down like an iron chain. The following morning, Sarah acted as if nothing had changed. She hummed while making coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and left for work, leaving me alone in a house that now felt foreign. I stared at the untouched coffee she had left me, bitterness rising in my throat. What was I supposed to do? Tell her I knew? Pack her things and throw her out? I thought of our years together, the memories we had made, and the life we had built. But those memories felt tainted now, like they belonged to someone else. I decided to dig deeper. If she was capable of this betrayal, there had to be more. Over the next few weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I tracked her phone, monitored her social media, and even installed a GPS tracker on her car. The guilt of spying on her was quickly eclipsed by what I uncovered. She wasn't just seeing this man occasionally. They were intertwined in a way that made my blood boil. Weekend getaways, late-night rendezvous, even gifts I had seen her unwrap with a coy smile, claiming they were from work. One evening, while scrolling through her calendar, I noticed a recurring event labeled yoga class every Thursday night. Sarah had never been interested in yoga before, but I hadn't questioned it. Now, I had to know. That Thursday, I followed her. She didn't go to a yoga studio. She drove to a small boutique hotel on the other side of town. My stomach twisted as I parked a block away and watched her walk inside. I waited, counting the minutes, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. After about 30 minutes, the man from the photos walked into the hotel. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded in my ears as I watched him stride inside, casual, confident, like he had every right to be there. This wasn't a fleeting affair. This was planned, calculated, repeated. As the hours passed, I sat in the car, consumed by thoughts of revenge. How could she do this to me? To us? Did she even feel guilty? Or had I been reduced to nothing more than a prop in her double life? When she finally emerged, her hair slightly tousled, her face glowing with a smile I hadn't seen in years, I felt something inside me snap. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And I wasn't going to lose. The following morning, Sarah greeted me as if nothing had happened. She leaned in for a kiss, but I turned away under the guise of a yawn. Her lips barely brushed my cheek. "Late night?" I asked, my voice steady. She froze for a split second, just enough to betray the lie forming on her lips. Yoga ran over. The instructor kept us longer than usual. I nodded, sipping my coffee. Sounds exhausting. The way her shoulders relaxed told me she thought I'd bought it. But I hadn't. That day, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to confront Sarah. I was going to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. Every ounce of betrayal, humiliation, and pain. But first, I needed to gather everything. Proof, leverage, and a plan that ensured she couldn't wriggle her way out. I started with her phone. While she showered that evening, I cloned it, mirroring every message, photo, and video to a secure drive. The contents were worse than I'd imagined. Explicit texts, photos, even plans for their next getaway. She called him my king. The same words she used for me in the early days of our relationship. The next step was securing financial control. Over the years, Sarah and I had merged everything: bank accounts, credit cards, even the mortgage. I spent the following week quietly shifting funds into an account she didn't know existed. I canceled unnecessary subscriptions, redirected mail to a P.O. box, and locked down our joint savings. It felt dirty, underhanded, but I told myself it was necessary. Sarah had already destroyed our trust. Now, I was just protecting myself from the fallout. Then came the evidence. I spent hours combing through the footage I had recorded from her hotel escapade. It was damning, clear enough to leave no room for denial. I also pieced together every incriminating text, every calendar entry, every receipt for dinners and gifts. I consulted a lawyer, laying out the details of the affair. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands on the desk and gave me a grim smile. "You have more than enough to proceed," she said. "We'll file for divorce citing infidelity. Depending on how her lover is involved, we might be able to pursue him legally as well." I nodded, my chest tightening at the word divorce. Claire leaned forward. "You need to be prepared for how ugly this will get. Are you ready for that?" I wasn't sure if I was, but I nodded anyway. The real challenge came that weekend. Sarah announced she was going to visit her sister in another town. An alibi I'd already seen her plan in her messages. She kissed me on the cheek, lingering like she was trying to gauge my reaction. "Have fun," I said, forcing a smile. As soon as she left, I followed her. She didn't go to her sister's. She drove straight to another hotel, where her lover was waiting. I stayed parked nearby, capturing everything on my phone. Photos of them checking in hand, laughing like carefree teenagers. This time, I didn't wait hours. I called the hotel, using a false pretense to confirm their room number. Then, I walked inside. My heart pounded as I stood outside their door. I could hear faint laughter from within, muffled by the barrier between us. My knuckles hovered inches from the wood, trembling. Part of me wanted to burst in, to demand answers, to shout my pain into the room. But I stopped myself. This wasn't the time. Not yet. Instead, I slipped a small recording device under the doorframe and walked away, my fists clenched. The game wasn't over, but the pieces were all in place. And soon, Sarah would understand the depth of her betrayal and the lengths I was willing to go to make her pay. The day after Sarah's sister visit, I pretended nothing had changed. She returned home cheerful, carrying a box of cookies she claimed her niece had baked. I forced a smile, even biting into one as I fought the bile rising in my throat. Her lies were so practiced now, so casual. It made me wonder if I had ever truly known her. That night, I went through the audio from the recording device I had placed under their hotel door. The contents weren't just intimate, they were incriminating. Between laughter and whispered confessions, I heard them mocking me. "He doesn't suspect a thing," Sarah said, her tone dripping with smugness. "I could tell him I was abducted by aliens, and he'd probably believe me." Her lover laughed, low and arrogant. "He's just the boring husband, keeping the house warm. You deserve better than that." Their words cut deep, but they also steeled my resolve. This wasn't just an affair. It was a mockery of everything I had given her, of the life we had built together. The next morning, I put the final piece of my plan into motion. I arranged for Sarah's closest friends to meet at our house for a casual Sunday brunch. These were women who had stood beside her on our wedding day, who had celebrated our anniversaries and birthdays. They adored her, or so they thought. Sarah was delighted by the idea. "What's the occasion?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "No occasion," I lied. "Just thought it would be nice to catch up with everyone." She kissed me on the cheek, a gesture that now felt hollow. The brunch was perfectly orchestrated. I spent the morning preparing Sarah's favorite dishes, ensuring everything looked flawless. When her friends arrived, the atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter and chatter. I waited until everyone had finished eating before I made my move. "Thank you all for coming," I began, raising my glass in a mock toast. I wanted to take this moment to celebrate honesty and trust, two things I've always valued in our marriage. Sarah froze, her smile faltering. "But lately," I continued, my voice steady, "I've discovered some discrepancies in what I thought I knew about my wife." The room fell silent. Sarah's friends exchanged uneasy glances. "Sarah," I said, turning to her, "would you care to explain where you really were during your yoga classes and sister visits?" Her face turned pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope containing the photos and printouts of her texts. I tossed it onto the table, the contents spilling out for everyone to see. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs as her friends leaned in, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock. "Is this some kind of joke?" one of them asked, holding up a photo of Sarah and her lover, their arms wrapped around each other. "It's no joke," I said coldly. "This is the reality of my marriage." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can explain." "Don't," I cut her off, my voice sharp. "You've already said enough." She looked around the room, her eyes pleading with her friends for support. But none of them spoke. The rest of the brunch was a blur. Sarah's friends quickly made excuses to leave, their eyes filled with pity and judgment. Sarah tried to follow them, but I stopped her at the door. "We're not done," I said firmly. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. "How could you humiliate me like that? How could you humiliate me?" I shot back. "You've been lying to me, to everyone, for months. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" Her defiance crumbled, replaced by tears. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. I laughed bitterly. "You didn't just hurt me, Sarah. You destroyed everything we had. And now you're going to face the consequences." I handed her a folder, neatly prepared with divorce papers. "Sign these," I said, "and we'll part ways quietly. No messy court battles, no dragging your name through the mud more than I already have." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder, scanning the documents. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm dead serious," I replied. "If you refuse, I'll release the photos and recordings to everyone who matters, to your family, your colleagues, even your precious lover." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Try me," I said, my voice icy. I left her standing there, clutching the papers as I walked out of the room. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice, and Sarah was going to feel every ounce of it. The days that followed were a storm of chaos. Sarah tried everything to regain control, but I was one step ahead. At first, she attempted to reason with me, using soft words and tearful apologies. "It was a mistake," she pleaded one night, clutching my arm. "I got caught up in something stupid. I still love you. We can fix this." I stared at her, my face a mask of indifference. "Love?" I scoffed. "Do you even understand what that word means? You've destroyed everything we built. There's no fixing this." Her tone shifted after that. She grew defensive, then angry. "This isn't just my fault," she shouted one evening, slamming her glass onto the counter. "You've been so distant, so boring. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have looked elsewhere." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see the pain she caused. "You don't get to rewrite history, Sarah," I said coldly. "You made your choices. Now you live with them." The turning point came when she showed up at my workplace. I was in a meeting when the receptionist informed me she was waiting in the lobby. My colleagues, unaware of the turmoil in my personal life, exchanged curious glances as I excused myself. "What the hell are you doing here?" I hissed as I approached her. She looked frantic, her eyes red and swollen. "You won't answer my calls. You've locked me out of everything. I don't know what to do." "That's the point," I said, my voice low and venomous. "You don't get to call the shots anymore." Her face crumpled, but I wasn't moved. "Go home, Sarah, or whatever place you're calling home now." Her desperation turned to fury. "You're a monster," she spat. "You think you're the victim here, but you're just as much to blame." I smirked, leaning in close. "You can scream and cry all you want, Sarah, but at the end of the day, I'm the one holding all the cards." True to my word, I began leaking pieces of her betrayal to those closest to her. I didn't do it maliciously, but strategically. A well-timed photo sent to her boss. A forwarded message to her parents. It wasn't long before the facade she had built around herself crumbled entirely. Her lover, the man she had risked everything for, abandoned her as soon as the fallout began. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had transferred to another city, likely to escape the scandal. Sarah, once the picture of confidence and poise, became a shell of herself. She called me constantly, begging for a chance to make things right. But I was done. The divorce proceedings were swift. With the evidence I had gathered, there was no contesting the terms. I kept the house, the savings, and the assets we had built together. She left with nothing but her clothes and a tarnished reputation. Her friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the drama that surrounded her. Her family, though sympathetic, couldn't look past the pain she had caused. I, on the other hand, found solace in the aftermath. It wasn't joy, it wasn't even relief, but it was a sense of closure, a chance to start over without the weight of betrayal on my shoulders. Months later, I received a letter from Sarah. It was handwritten, the ink smudged in places as if she had written it through tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me, and I don't blame you if you hate me. I've lost everything because of my own selfishness. I just wanted you to know that I will regret what I did for the rest of my life. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it all away. I'm sorry." I read it twice before folding it and placing it in a drawer. It didn't change anything, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of pity for her. Not enough to absolve her, but enough to release the last of my anger. Life moved on. I rebuilt slowly, leaning on friends and family who reminded me of my worth. There were moments of loneliness, of doubt, but they were fleeting. One evening, while walking through the park, I met someone. She was kind, genuine, and real in a way Sarah had never been. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of hope. As we parted ways, she handed me her number. "Call me sometime," she said with a smile. I smiled back, feeling a sense of freedom I hadn't known in a long time. The past was behind me now, and for the first time, I was ready to embrace the future. In the months following the divorce, I expected to feel liberated, but instead, there was a strange hollowness that I couldn't shake. The anger, the pain, and even the satisfaction of Sarah's downfall had burned out, leaving behind a void that felt impossible to fill. At night, the house was too quiet. I'd sit on the couch, surrounded by the remnants of our life together. The furniture we picked out, the photos I hadn't yet taken down, the little knickknacks that had once held memories of happier times. Each item felt like a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. Still, I wasn't about to let her win. I started to reclaim the space. The first thing I did was clear out the bedroom. The bed we had shared was the first to go. I sold it online and bought something brand new, a fresh start, even if it was just symbolic. I painted the walls a warm shade of green, a color that had always made me feel calm. I replaced the photos on the shelves with images of places I wanted to visit, setting my sights on the future rather than dwelling on the past. Though I tried to move forward, Sarah's descent into ruin was impossible to ignore. Word got around quickly in our small circle. Her lover had completely ghosted her, leaving her to deal with the consequences alone. She lost her job, likely because her reputation had become a liability. One night, a mutual friend, Lily, called me out of the blue. "I ran into Sarah today," she said cautiously. "Good for you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "She looked bad," Lily continued. "Like, really bad. I think she's staying at her parents' place now." I didn't ask for more details. I didn't need them. "You're not responsible for her, you know," Lily said, her voice soft. "I know," I replied, and I meant it. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder how things had come to this point. One rainy Saturday, I went to a local coffee shop to catch up on some work. As I stood in line, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "John?" I turned around and froze. It was Sarah. She looked different, thinner, her eyes tired and her face pale. She wasn't wearing makeup, something she'd never skipped before. "Hi," I said cautiously. I didn't expect to see you here," she stammered, her hands gripping her purse tightly. I nodded, unsure what to say. "Can we sit for a minute?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat at a corner table, the rain tapping softly against the window. Sarah stared at her hands, fidgeting with the edges of a napkin. "I don't know where to start," she said finally. "Try the truth," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She flinched but nodded. "I messed up. I know I did. And I've paid for it. I've lost everything." I didn't respond, letting the silence stretch between us. "I never meant for things to get so out of control," she continued. "At first, it was just excitement. Something new. But it became something else, something toxic." "Why?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. I was selfish. Stupid. I thought I could have it all, but I ended up with nothing. I wanted to feel anger, but all I felt was exhaustion." "I don't hate you, Sarah," I said finally, "but I don't forgive you either. Not yet." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I don't deserve it, but I needed to say it. How sorry I am. For everything." I stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Take care of yourself, Sarah." As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt lighter, as though I had left a part of the pain behind. That night, I sat on my new bed and looked out the window at the city lights. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't think about Sarah. I thought about the future, about the woman I'd met in the park, the trips I wanted to take, the life I still had ahead of me. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't define me. Not anymore. It was time to move forward. And for the first time, I felt ready. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to feel normal again. Or at least a new version of normal. I threw myself into work, projects, and hobbies I'd neglected for years. I took up jogging, joined a local book club, and even started volunteering at an animal shelter on weekends. It wasn't a magical fix, but each small step pulled me further away from the shadow Sarah had cast over my life. Then there was Emma. I'd met her by chance during one of my morning runs at the park. She was walking a golden retriever who seemed far more enthusiastic about the interaction than either of us. "Sorry," she called, trying to untangle the leash as her dog bounded toward me. "No problem," I said, laughing as the dog sniffed eagerly at my shoes. We exchanged pleasantries, and I learned that her name was Emma and her dog's name was Max. There was something about her warmth, her easy laugh, that stayed with me long after she walked away. A week later, I saw her again at the park. This time, she was sitting on a bench, reading a book while Max lounged at her feet. I hesitated, unsure if I should approach, but Max made the decision for me, trotting over as if we were old friends. "Well, hello again," Emma said, looking up with a smile. "Looks like Max remembers me," I said, scratching the dog behind the ears. We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing effortlessly. She was a graphic designer, recently moved to the area after a bad breakup. Her openness was refreshing, a stark contrast to the secrets and lies I'd been used to. When we parted ways, she handed me a card with her number on it. "In case you ever want to grab a coffee or have a jogging partner," she said with a smile. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of excitement. It took me 2 days to muster the courage to text her. We arranged to meet for coffee the following Saturday, and I spent the entire week wondering if I was ready for this. Ready to open myself up again, to trust someone new. The coffee date was simple but perfect. Emma was kind, funny, and thoughtful. She listened without judgment when I told her about Sarah, and she shared her own story of heartbreak. "It's scary, isn't it?" she said, stirring her latte. "Putting yourself out there again after being hurt. Terrifying, I admitted. But worth it," she said, her eyes meeting mine. Emma and I began seeing each other regularly. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but something quieter, steadier. We spent hours talking, walking Max, and exploring the city together. She was patient with me, never pushing, always letting things unfold naturally. One evening, as we sat on my couch watching a movie, she reached for my hand. "You're different," she said softly. "Different how?" I asked. "Strong," she replied, "but kind. It's a rare combination." Her words stayed with me, a balm for the wounds I was still healing from. A few months into our relationship, Emma and I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen her since our conversation at the coffee shop. She looked better, healthier, more put together. But the sight of her still sent a jolt through me. "John," she said, her eyes darting between me and Emma. "Hi." "Hi, Sarah," I replied evenly. There was an awkward pause before Sarah spoke again. "I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're doing well. You look happy." "I am," I said, glancing at Emma, who smiled encouragingly. Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening. "Take care." As she walked away, Emma squeezed my hand. "You okay?" she asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Yeah, I am." And for the first time, I truly meant it. Emma and I continued to build something new, something real. She taught me that love didn't have to be grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It could be quiet moments, shared laughs, and unwavering support. Sarah was a chapter in my life, a painful one, but also a lesson. She taught me the value of self-worth, of resilience, and of never settling for less than I deserved. With Emma, I found not just love, but peace. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. The past was behind me. The future was bright. And I was finally ready to embrace it. Life with Emma was good. It wasn't perfect. No relationship ever is. But it was honest and genuine, built on trust. Every day with her felt like a step further from the wreckage Sarah had left behind. I had stopped thinking about Sarah altogether, until the day a letter from her arrived in my mailbox. It was a simple white envelope, addressed in her familiar handwriting. For a moment, I considered throwing it away unopened. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, bracing myself for whatever lay inside. "John, I don't deserve your time, but I hope you'll read this anyway. I wanted to thank you for the way you handled everything during our divorce. You could have destroyed me completely, but you didn't. You could have made it so much worse, and I'll always be grateful for that. I've been doing a lot of reflecting since then. Therapy has helped me see the person I became, and the damage I caused, not just to you, but to myself. There are no excuses for what I did, and I won't insult you by trying to justify it. I just wanted you to know I'm truly sorry. I hope you're happy now, and I hope you found someone who treats you the way you deserve to be treated. I'll always regret losing you, but I'm glad you're free of me. You deserve that freedom. Take care. Sarah. I sat there for a long time after reading the letter, my emotions a jumble of confusion and clarity. It didn't change anything, couldn't change anything, but it felt like a closing chapter to a book I thought I'd already finished. That evening, I showed the letter to Emma. She read it silently, her expression thoughtful. When she finished, she handed it back to me. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels angry, like it's too little too late. But another part of me feels lighter, I guess." Emma nodded. "Closure can be messy," she said, "but it sounds like she's trying to make amends in her own way." "I don't think I'll respond," I said after a pause. "You don't have to," Emma replied. "Sometimes, just knowing it's over is enough." She was right. The letter marked the end of Sarah's presence in my life. From that moment, I focused entirely on the present, on Emma, on my career, on the dreams I had once shelved. Emma and I started planning a trip to Europe, something I had always wanted to do but never could with Sarah. We mapped out itineraries, laughing over the places we'd prioritize. Paris for the romance, Rome for the history, and Santorini for the sunsets. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a symbol of how far I had come, of how much I had rebuilt. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of Emma's apartment, sipping wine and watching the city lights, I realized something. For all the pain I had endured, for all the heartbreak Sarah had caused, none of it mattered anymore. Emma was my future. "Emma," I said, setting my glass down and turning to her. She raised an eyebrow, smiling. "Yes? I know it's only been a year, and I know we've both been through a lot, but I love you. I love the life we're building, and I don't want to spend another day wondering if you feel the same way." Her eyes widened as I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. Emma's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." I slid the ring onto her finger, my heart soaring as she threw her arms around me. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And I owed it all to the lessons of my past and the hope of a brighter future. Emma and I decided on a small wedding, just close friends and family. After the chaos of my previous life, I craved simplicity, and Emma felt the same way. We chose a beautiful outdoor venue, a secluded garden with blooming flowers and twinkling fairy lights. The ceremony was intimate, heartfelt. As Emma walked down the aisle in her understated yet elegant dress, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. She was everything I never knew I needed, and in that moment, I realized just how far I had come. My parents, who had watched me endure the darkest days of my life, cried tears of joy as I exchanged vows with Emma. "You've found your light," my mom said afterward, hugging me tightly. I had that a month after the wedding. Sarah reached out again. This time, it was an email. She congratulated me on my marriage, saying she had seen pictures on social media through mutual friends. Her words were polite, almost distant, but there was a sadness that lingered between the lines. I didn't respond. Emma noticed my quiet mood that evening and asked if I was okay. "It's Sarah," I admitted. "She emailed me." Emma's brow furrowed. What did she want? Nothing, really. Just closure, I guess. Emma took my hand. "You don't owe her anything, John. You've given enough of yourself already." She was right. I deleted the email and never looked back. Our honeymoon in Europe was everything we dreamed it would be. We explored cobblestone streets, ate gelato under the Roman sun, and danced in the moonlight of Santorini. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a celebration of new beginnings. One night, As we sat on a terrace overlooking the Eiffel Tower, Emma asked me, "Do you ever think about what happened with Sarah?" "Not anymore," I said honestly. "It's part of my story, but it doesn't define me." "You do." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "And you define me." When we returned home, Emma and I focused on building a life together. We bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, filling it with laughter and love. Max, her golden retriever, became our first child, spoiled beyond belief. We often talked about having children of our own, though we decided to wait a few years. For now, we were content just being us. I felt a joy I hadn't thought possible, a lightness that made even the ordinary moments, cooking dinner, gardening, watching movies, feel extraordinary. One afternoon, while grocery shopping, I saw Sarah again. She was in the frozen foods aisle, looking thinner and more worn than before. She noticed me, her eyes widening in recognition. I considered walking away, but something made me stop. "Hi, Sarah," I said cautiously. "John," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi." We stood there awkwardly for a moment before she spoke again. "You look good." "Happy." "I am," I said simply. Her eyes flicked to the wedding ring on my hand, and she nodded. "I'm glad. You deserve it." I didn't say anything else, and neither did she. We parted ways, and for the first time, seeing her didn't stir anger or sadness. It just felt neutral. 2 years after our wedding, Emma and I welcomed our first child, a baby girl named Lily. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I was overwhelmed by a love I couldn't have imagined. She was perfect, with Emma's warm brown eyes and my unruly hair. She became the center of our world, filling our days with sleepless nights, first giggles, and milestones that made every struggle worth it. Becoming a father gave me a new perspective on life. It wasn't about dwelling on the past, but about shaping the future, for Lily, for Emma, and for me. Years later, as I watched Lily and her younger brother, Max Jr., playing in the backyard, I reflected on how far I'd come. The man I had been, the man betrayed, broken, and consumed by anger, felt like a distant memory. Emma joined me on the porch, handing me a glass of iced tea. She smiled as she watched the kids. "Life's good, isn't it?" "It is," I said, taking her hand. And it truly was. Sarah's betrayal had once felt like the end of everything, but it had been the beginning of something greater. It taught me the value of resilience, the power of self-worth, and the beauty of finding love that was real and lasting. My life had come full circle, and for the first time, I was exactly where I was meant to be.